section, we talked about the gospel, and we talked about what the gospel is, and we shared some really great models that you can use to not only understand the gospel, but actually share the gospel in a discipling relationship. I like to call those things little napkin sketches, because you could pull a napkin out onto the table and you could draw out those little models, and they really do help you understand the gospel. So you may be asking yourself the question, okay, if we spent this whole last section in the gospel, why are we spending a whole nother section just talking about the gospel? Because I love the way that Timothy Keller put it. Timothy Keller said it like this: the gospel is simple, but the gospel is not simplistic. And I think a lot of times the problem that Christians have with the gospel, especially in sharing the gospel with the world around them, is number one, we don't listen, and number two, we go with a simplistic gospel. We don't think about how the gospel is applied in specific communities. And so that's what this whole section is about. This whole section of the training is about showing you different ways that we apply the gospel and how we share the gospel to different specific communities. Now, we're not going to hit every single community in this, but what we're going to be talking about is this concept of contextualization. Meaning, what does it look like when we step into a community? We begin to listen to that community. We hear the pain in that community and the law that community is experiencing. And then how do we apply the gospel to the law that's being experienced? That's what it is to contextualize. The best example I can give you of contextualization is actually this office space that I'm sitting in. You know, the office space that I picked when we moved down to Florida is a really great office space. There's about 250 entrepreneurs. It's somewhere that put me in the center of the community where I could meet people and make connections. But what's really unique about this shared office space is, unlike other shared office spaces, it's in what used to be a skate park. Now, it gives it this really cool vibe, because rather than tear everything down and rebuild it as just a shared use office space, they said there's something cool about the fact that this used to be a skate park. It's got this kind of like entrepreneurial energy. So what they did is they took the office space and they contextualized it into the skate park. So when you walk through the front doors of the office space, you'll see little skateboards on the wall, and those skateboards have different sponsors because the office space is a 501c3 that's helping launch out tech firms. You'll walk around, and in some of the conference rooms like this one that I'm in, you'll see graffiti up on the top of the walls. Very much looks like a skate park, and yet when you walk through this office space, you're gonna find a station for making coffee. You're gonna find desks. You're gonna find charge cables. You're gonna find conference rooms throughout the space, because it's not just saying, okay, this was a skate park, let's leave it a skate park. This has to be an office that you can use to come in and do work and have meetings and do all the things you need to do to be able to run a company, right? So that's what contextualization looks like. It steps into the community, keeping the importance and the essence of what it is, and yet it embodies certain aspects of the community that allow it to have a unique feel. See, that's what happens when the gospel ingrains itself into the community. It highlights the things that are good, that express the aspects of the gospel. It exposes things that are bad, and it takes other things and shows them how they can be redeemed. That's what it looks like to contextualize the gospel. So rather than simply talk to you about contextualizing the gospel, what we thought would be much better is to have a series of conversations about the gospel and what the gospel looks like in context in very different ministry settings and situations. And so we're going to take an opportunity to talk to Howard and Mike, who are in the 3rd Ward of Houston. Howard is a church planter, planting Soon Church, and Mike works for a justice ministry that works with those that are incarcerated, and the two partner together. And so you're going to get to hear what the gospel sounds like for those that are in the midst of incarceration, the families of those that have been incarcerated. You're also going to get to hear some of the unique experiences of what the gospel sounds like and how they apply the gospel to the community in which they live and the issues in which they face. You're going to get to hear from Dan Fanko, who planted a ministry called Camino de Fe in the Northeast in New Jersey. And Camino de Fe is a unique ministry that reaches out to the Hispanic community that's just immigrated in. And it's amazing to hear how Dan applied the gospel in that community and what the gospel sounds like to those those who are in the community. And then finally, you're going to get to hear once again from Trey and I, because Trey and I, before ever doing a missional pathway, had a history together doing church. And you're going to hear about a church that we planted called The Point, and a group of people that we reached out to, and how we applied the gospel in order to reach the unique community that we were reaching out to. Now, these aren't all the examples of how you contextualize the gospel, but I think if you get an opportunity to listen in to how people are contextualizing the gospel, I think you'll have a better understanding of how you can listen to your community and some of the unique ways in which you can apply the gospel so that people can come to know who Jesus is, the great things he's done for them, and have their life radically changed. So let's continue with our first conversation in this Contextualizing the Gospel session.